This wasn't supposed to happen. A country once bound by language, blood and history now stands as the fiercest thorn in Russia's side. Ukraine, often dismissed as the little brother, has defied centuries of domination, military pressure and psychological warfare. And today it is not just resisting, it's reshaping the future of Eastern Europe. But how did we get here? How did a former Soviet republic become the Kremlin's worst nightmare? This is not just a story of tanks and territory. This is a story of rebellion, of culture, of survival. This is the story of how Ukraine became Russia's worst nightmare. Long before Ukraine and Russia were countries, they were ideas. 1,000 years ago, in the heart of Eastern Europe, there stood a kingdom called Kievan Rus. It was powerful, proud, a federation of Slavic tribes with Kyiv as its shining capital. Not Moscow, not St. Petersburg, Kyiv. And that fact still stings in Moscow, because while modern Russia traces its origin back to this shared ancestry, it was Ukraine that held the ancient throne. Then came centuries of conquest, the Mongols, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Tsars. Ukraine was split, battered, absorbed, but never fully broken. By the 20th century, Ukraine found itself in the grip of a new empire, the Soviet Union. In the 1930s, under Stalin, Ukraine suffered one of the darkest chapters in human history. It's called the Holodomor, the death by hunger, a man-made famine engineered by the Soviet regime. Grain was seized, borders sealed, millions starved. Some call it genocide. The Kremlin still refuses to. This wound, this trauma, left scars so deep that decades couldn't erase them. So when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Ukraine didn't celebrate just independence. It exhaled. For the first time in generations, Ukraine had a chance to decide its own future. But Russia saw something else. It saw a loss of land, of influence, of pride. The 2000s brought more than just economic turbulence. In 2004, something incredible happened. Fast forward to 2014. Ukraine was once again at a crossroads. Its President Viktor Yanukovych, Moscow's man, rejected a European Union deal at the last minute. That betrayal lit a fuse. Protests erupted in Kyiv's Maidan Square. They weren't just angry, they were volcanic. The Orange Revolution. Ukrainians poured into the streets, not with weapons, but with chants, with flags, with faith in democracy. The world watched as a pro-Russian rigged election was overturned by peaceful protest. For the Kremlin, this was terrifying. If Ukraine, so close, so familiar, could rise up and demand change, what's to stop Russians from doing the same? Moscow saw Ukraine's democratic fire not just as rebellion, but as contagion. And Putin? He vowed it would not spread. Ukraine fought back, but the cost was enormous. Thousands dead, cities turned to rubble, families displaced. The line between Ukraine and Russia was no longer just political. It was burning. February 24th, 2022. Russia invaded. Not with whispers, but with tanks, missiles, soldiers. It was supposed to fall in 3 days. The world braced for Kyiv's collapse, bleeding. And yet, something shifted. Instead of collapsing, Ukraine began to harden. In the years that followed, Ukraine didn't retreat. It evolved. Corrupt leaders were voted out. New alliances were forged. The army, once outdated, was rebuilt with grit and purpose. More than that, a national identity was forming. Not Soviet, not Russian, Ukrainian. In language, in culture, in politics, Ukraine was no longer a grey zone. It was becoming something Russia feared, a free nation. By 2021, over 60% of Ukrainians supported joining NATO. To Moscow, this was not just betrayal, it was provocation. And so the nightmare began. But Ukraine stood. Cities held. Civilians armed themselves. President Zelensky didn't flee. He filmed a video in the streets. "I am here, we are not afraid." From grandmothers blocking tanks to farmers towing away Russian equipment, Ukraine became a symbol of defiance, of unity, of resistance. Europe united like never before. Sweden and Finland joined NATO. Germany rearmed. Sanctions hit Russia hard. But Ukraine, it became the front line of democracy, no longer just a post-Soviet republic. It was the world's David, staring down Goliath. For Putin, this was catastrophic. His goal was fear. What he created was inspiration. Ukraine had embarrassed a superpower, militarily, diplomatically, and morally. Today, the war continues. Towns are still shelled. Families still flee. But so does Ukraine's resolve. What began as a land grab turned into a reckoning. The very idea of Russian dominance is being dismantled. Not by America, not by NATO, but by the very people they once called little brothers. And the greatest irony, the more Putin tried to control Ukraine, the more Ukraine became ungovernable. Not because of anarchy, but because of freedom. Ukraine is not just a country anymore. It is a movement, a mirror to every empire that thought people would stay silent. In trying to crush its spirit, Russia has awakened it. And in that awakening, Ukraine has become something far more dangerous than an enemy. It has become an example. So when the dust settles, when the last missile is launched, Russia may still hold its empire, but its nightmare will always have a name: Ukraine.